might not necessarily have insight on this, but I think you can probably agree with us on shooting this down. Lars Nootbaar still thinks that the Cardinals have a shot of signing Yamamoto. What do you think?
I don't think so based on what I've heard, but perhaps Lars has special insight here. And Lars might be in communication with the Cardinals front office, and perhaps there's something going on that we don't know about. But that would be a shock to be sure. And it's just from the standpoint of the kind of contract he's going to command, not something the Cardinals would typically do, right? They're not a team that goes above market. So I'd be surprised, but I'm not going to discount something a player on a team says because, again, he might have insight that I don't.
Mystery team, Ken.
They would be the mystery team. They would be, for sure.
Yeah, true.
And that's where I wanted to go, the mystery team, because it talks about how Philly offered him money now. So, like, I know Kratz might have had this question too, but I'm sure he's wondering too, does Philly really have a shot here as well besides the other three big teams?
That's a good question. And Todd, it's interesting. I would have said no 2 weeks ago, but learning what we have in the past couple of days, how not only did they meet with him, but they met with him and made a legitimate offer. They are in the mix. So do I expect him to go there? No. They've only had 2 Japanese players in their history. There's not a great tradition of that there. I wrote about this earlier this week. They're trying to establish a foothold in Japan, and that is why I thought perhaps they encouraged Joel Wolf, the agent, and Yamamoto to meet with them. They wanted to show they're serious, but this seems to be more than that. And the one thing I will say about the Phillies under John Middleton, he likes his stars. We've seen that. He likes free agents. He likes to go big, and for special players, he will do that. Did it for Harper, did it for Trey Turner, to a lesser extent Schwarber and Castellanos, and now Aaron Nola. So while it would seemingly put them in luxury tax misery, at the same time, if they feel like they can do it, they are going to do it. And the question then becomes, would he do it? Would Yamamoto agree to come to Philadelphia over New York or Boston or LA or San Francisco? That is where the doubt comes in.
I like how you said New York, the first team, after you said Philly. So there's kind of an inkling there. I'm starting to feel. Either way. Next question. So I'm just kidding. I want to ask a question about, the people that he's talked to already. I mean, I feel like Masahiro Tanaka might have something to do with this, maybe have a conversation with him as well. We've heard rumors about it. Have you heard any rumors about other players talking to him from Japan about the great, the big lights in New York, how he wants to be in that situation?
I don't know about specifics there, but there have been players talking to him at length. Major league players from these various teams. We've learned of certain meetings, and Harper had sent a video, Bryce Harper, to the Phillies to show to Yamamoto. The Dodgers had several players in their meeting, et cetera, et cetera. And I am sure that he's talking with, for instance, Kodai Senga from the Mets, right? He's fellow Japanese pitcher, a guy that they've played together with on Team Japan. I'm sure these conversations are taking place along with conversations with American players that might have been over in Japan and would have some insight into just the different teams and the ballparks and the cities. So there's a lot going on here in terms of his research, but that process probably is coming to an end. And where we are now is the bidding stage at which the agents are collecting offers and weighing them against each other and going from there.
All right. So the Red Sox have a shot, and should they? And can they make a legitimate push for Yamamoto?
Definitely should, Eric. And here's a team that let go of its chief baseball officer, Chaim Bloom, because they said, well, they said it without saying it, that he wasn't going big enough. He was doing things on the margins that they liked. He helped with the farm system, certainly, but they needed to do some bigger things. And at the start of the offseason, their chairman, Tom Werner, said, we are going to go full throttle this offseason. Well, Yamamoto, with the kind of deal that we're expecting him to sign, that would qualify as full throttle and also address their biggest need, which is a top-of-the-rotation starter. So for the Red Sox, whoops, sorry about that, guys, like a number of other teams in this mix, he is an absolute need and must in certain cases, and maybe in their case. So If they don't get him, then the question becomes, okay, what qualifies as full throttle? Is it Blake Snell? Is it Jordan Montgomery? I guess you can make that case, but it's not like Yamamoto.
Ken, I know Yamamoto's kind of everyone's talking about. He's going to be he's the big name, the hot name. It was Ohtani. Now we've moved on to Yamamoto. But look, my favorite player here, Corbin Burnes, right? He's just sitting here, and we had him on the other day, and he said he will not sign an extension like Glasnow if he is traded. Is that holding up him possibly being traded, and is that leading more towards the Brewers keeping him for the 24 season and maybe trading him at the trade deadline?
AJ, it does make it more difficult. And what Corbin said on the show the other day was merely reinforcing what people in baseball knew already. He's represented by Scott Boras. Scott Boras clients almost never sign extensions 1 year out from going to the open market. It's just not something that he wants his clients to do. And Corbin Burnes explained it very well. He said, you guys, I'm this close. I want to test the market, which is completely understandable. A player plays 6 years to get that right to test free agency. Now, how does this affect the trade market? A couple of different ways, and it's a complicated situation the Brewers are in. Their owner, Mark Attanasio, still remembers what happened a couple of years ago when they traded Josh Hader, the backlash that they received, the way that affected the team. And that was in the middle of the season, and this is the offseason, so it wouldn't be quite the same. But he just lost his manager, Craig Counsell. I am quite certain he would like to compete, at least at the start of next season, compete against the team that hired Craig Counsell, the Chicago Cubs, and that is all part of this. And then you get to the contract. So in arbitration this year, he's projected to earn about $15 million. It's $15 million, and it's 1 year. You're only getting him for 1 year. The Dodgers gave up quite a bit for Glasnow because the deal was contingent on the extension. So they were willing to give up more because they knew they were getting him for 5 years. It's different with this, and that depresses the price. It depresses the return you're getting for Corbin Burnes. So maybe if you're the Brewers, I wrote about this in my most recent notes column, maybe you say, okay, let's take him into the season. Let's take Adames into the season as well. Willie Adames, the shortstop, also a potential free agent. We can regroup at the deadline if we're not in contention, or we can just see this through and try to make the postseason for, I believe, the 6th time in 7 years. The problem with that is if you keep Burnes and you keep Adames, you probably make Burnes a qualifying offer. You almost certainly do that. I don't know that you make Adames a qualifying offer. And even if you do, for those two guys, you're getting 1 draft pick each. You're not getting a draft pick for Brandon Woodruff, who you non-tendered. And long-term, that compromises the Brewers. So it's a really difficult balance to strike. You probably could get more at the deadline when there are no free agents available, but you take the risk. Corbin Burnes could get hurt. For whatever reason, he might not perform the same. His value could decline.
The only thing I want to pick at there, Ken, is the difference between Corbin Burnes and Tyler Glasnow. Corbin Burnes has been quite durable the last few seasons. Glasnow has never gone over 120 innings. I think that was also part of why we asked Burnes about a contract extension, and he's probably looking at Glasnow and saying, I should double that if I get to the free agent market next year. What I'm confused about is the $15 million. If I'm a team that is looking to win the World Series this coming season, he is the ultimate bargain. Jack Flaherty just signed for about that rate with the Detroit Tigers, and he was barely pitching as if he should be in a rotation. I know there's upside there, but Corbin Burnes is a 1. I mean, you look at his WAR the last few years, 3.5, 4, 5.3. And I know front offices are obsessed with surplus value. Let's say it's like $10 million per win on that, right? And we're just estimating here. It's worth like $40 million. And you'd be able to acquire him for 15 for 1 season. I just cannot get over how sometimes teams are looking at a rate like that. And the same thing with Soto when we talked about him and saying, that's a lot for 1 year.
Scott, you're absolutely right. And in terms of the sheer money, yes, there's no question. But what teams say in response to the Brewers when they're trying to trade for Corbin Burnes is, well, you're asking us to take on the $15 million, that's fine. But you're also asking us for top players, top prospects. And that's the difference between a Corbin Burnes and a Jack Flaherty, right? For Jack Flaherty, you didn't even give up a draft pick. So $15 million for a pitcher of this caliber, you're absolutely right, Scott. It is not that much money, and it should not be a deterrent, really, for any team. But It's that plus the prospects, plus the fact you're only controlling him for 1 year. That is what makes teams, I wouldn't say wary, but it makes them drive a harder bargain.
Let me ask you this question. Chapman, Bellinger, these are two guys that have been around for a while, excuse me, have been doing it for a while and have had pretty good years. It just seems like it's a little bit slow for them. Is there something holding this back, or is it just part of the process now, from year to year basis? Because these two guys can help out a ball club right away.
No doubt. And they'll sign. There's no question about that. They'll do fine. The whole market has been slowed down by Ohtani and Yamamoto to some extent. And keep in mind also that Chapman, Bellinger, Snell, and Montgomery are all represented by Scott Boras. And Scott Boras, in the wintertime, has never hesitated to hold out and to let people build momentum for his clients or however it might play out. Now, there have been exceptions to that. The year when he did Cole, Strasburg, and Rendon in a span of 3 days of the winter meetings. If he had the deals he wanted, he went. But he has never been hesitant to go into January. He did that with Scherzer. To go into February, he did that with Harper. I'm talking about Scherzer when he was going to the Nationals. So he controls those segments of the market, and ultimately, once Yamamoto goes, he has the best players remaining, and at that point, he'll be ready to go.
So, Ken, on Fair Territory the other day, you said how I believe it was 13 out of the top 40 on the Athletics free agent board have signed, and that means 27 are still unsigned. So I'm curious, if Yamamoto is holding up the market, do we suddenly have a spending spree during a time when baseball is supposed to be a little bit quieter? For my years of working in the sport as a broadcaster, the one time where usually there is maybe one or two signings, but almost nothing, is between Christmas and New Year's. Does desperation play in if Yamamoto suddenly signs on Saturday?
It's possible. And certainly there is no formal shutdown of the game between Christmas and New Year's. There used to be many years ago. There would be actually a 2-week period at the end of December in which nothing would happen. The offices were closed. That was it. There was nothing going on. That's not the way it is anymore. Generally speaking, like you said, Scott, there are deals between Christmas and New Year's. And if Yamamoto goes by Saturday, I would expect that some things would happen next week. I don't know that there's any question about it. A spending spree, I'm not so sure about that. And one of the problems with this market, and I didn't mention it in Fair Territory, and I should have, is that the quality of player is not as great as it was perhaps in recent years. The top-end guys. You just mentioned Chapman and Bellinger, Todd. They're really good players, no question about it. But there are questions about each of those guys. Bellinger with the exit velos and the consistency. Chapman with the fact that offensively he collapsed after his big April. They're not ideal free agents in the sense that, I don't know, Ohtani was or Garrett Cole was a few years ago. So that's part of this too, and that's part of the reason it's slowed down. But in terms of your question, Scott, I do expect things to happen next week, and it's just the way the sport operates. I'm not happy about it. I don't like the way the sport operates in this regard. And in fact, the people within the sport don't like it either. And I hear fans sometimes say to me, why are you guys bitching about the pace and dragging out? Well, the people in the sport, forget the media. I know you guys don't like us. But the people in the sport, the executives, the agents, all of the people who are involved in this process, they don't get a break. And it's not a healthy situation. Now, you might say they're making a lot of money, they're famous, whatever, they shouldn't get a break. No, everybody in their jobs would like a break from time to time. And that's something that baseball has not addressed in terms of the calendar or anything like that. And I don't expect them to. Frankly, they have not shown any interest in addressing that. But in terms of simply giving the general managers and the agents time to kind of refuel, that doesn't happen in this sport. And for those who work in it, again, exempting media, it's a problem.
Ken, you mentioned Scott Boras. He's always had the big names in years past. Not all of them, but a lot of the big names on the board. How does he do it every year? How does he – I understand he has great players, but there's always been times, Prince Fielder and some other guys come to mind, where he gets these guys till the last minute. You just mentioned Bellinger and Chapman, and he waits and waits and waits. And then finally some owner gets impatient and just goes, screw it, we're going to get this guy. How does he do it? And how does it happen like that every year? Because Boras guys don't sign early. They're always like the last ones to sign. I mean, this guy, is he a magician?
I wouldn't say he's a magician necessarily. He is good at picking out the one owner who might be in the most desperate position, or the two owners, and taking advantage of that. He does that extremely well. Now, he doesn't always succeed. And you look at Michael Conforto, that's one example of a guy who turned down a lengthy deal. It might not have been to Boras' liking when he was with the Mets, and ultimately gets hurt and doesn't get the same kind of deals coming out of that. Maybe he will long-term make up for that money. I don't know. But it's not always perfect. And those guys don't get as much publicity as the guys getting the big money. But Scott Boras is not perfect. No agent is perfect. No writer. Nobody in the game is perfect. So to answer your question, the bottom line is he is quite skilled at reading the market, and he's quite skilled at working teams and owners. And every year it seems it is a situation where he comes up with a few that make you go, wow, how did you get that money for that guy? And it doesn't always happen. And some guys who he represents don't get the money. But he has routinely done this year after year, AJ. And I don't know that anyone knows the secret to what he does, but he is good at getting money for the top guys. There's no doubt about that. And Juan Soto is next.
One thing that I think he's got is, and I don't know if other agents too have this in, but ownership. You talk to owners sometimes, you get a deal done. I know he's done that in the past. He's talked about it.
He's gone to Illich. He's gone to Lerner and watched DC before. I mean, when he did the A-Rod deal, he went to, what was the guy's name who used to own the Rangers? Tom Hicks. He went right to Tom Hicks. Like, it's a power play by an agent, though, because most agents have to go through a general manager. He goes right to owners.
It's a good move. They're the ones that actually make the decisions. So,
he's got the
Ken, appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much, and hopefully we get a little Yamamoto action in the next 48 hours. We all could use it.
Thanks, guys.